You're listening to Graphic Novel Explorers Club podcast, an audio book club.
Greetings, explorers. I'm one of your hosts, World Tag Team Champion, the Sultan of Comic Pages, the man who puts graphic in graphic novel, Dennis the Demolisher! As usual, I'm joined by the hip and soul, by my fellow tag team partners.
Oh yeah, brother! Johnny the Macho Man Flores.
And...
Francis.
Oh, and we got an episode today, brother. Today we are discussing Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia.
Oh yeah!
Written by Ed, the Carnage artist, Kuehnel. Hopefully I got that right. And masculine Matt Entin. And Dan the Body Schkade. We hope you have already read today's title, because all three of us have read the book, so beware, spoilers ahead. Explorers, if you want to chime in and share your opinions and thoughts with us, leave a comment on our Facebook page or on Twitter and Instagram at GN Explorers Club. Graphic Novel Explorers Club is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever your mama says. Also wherever podcasts are available. All right, well, today we're talking about Invasion from Planet Wrestletopia, published by Starburns Industries. It opens up, I wanted to ask you, Francis, because I'm not a Bible reader, but it opens up with a supposed Bible verse. Is that a true Bible verse?
I believe it is.
It is. I looked it up.
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
And I was actually really impressed at first because I didn't. So again, we read this digitally. You kind of have to scroll to get the whole thing.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this is good. And then I saw it actually is a Bible verse.
There's different versions of it. There's when
Probably like King
in trying to
James.
see if, because it kept talking about belts and
Right.
battles, and I was like,
This
what
can't
did
be real.
Yeah, this can't be real. And then I looked it up, and there's several versions of it, but it's basically that's one of the
Gotcha, because
versions.
Stone Cold Steve Austin would have a thing where he would like Austin 316 or something.
He'd
Like
make
it's
his
a
own
fake Bible
quotes.
verse, right?
I will. I don't know if this is relevant, but I think it may be. I took world religion in college as well, and we had to read a lot of different religious texts. Almost every religious book, be it the Bible,
Wait, they had
the
texting.
Quran.
They had texting.
Well,
around
books,
when-
like,
I
yeah.
know.
How do you think they made the Bible?
Yeah.
God was like emoji, fire.
Burning bush.
Yeah.
But yeah, in almost every single one, it does talk about how like war is allowed when you're fighting for God. Like,
Damn.
yeah, and I even started reading the New Testament when one of the wars broke out a while ago. I can't keep up with them anymore. But because someone was saying, no, like God says to do this, and it's like, oh, like some of the book there is like when you're fighting for God, when it's allowed.
Yeah,
Well, not allowed, but it's not.
You can justify it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's how the Crusades happened.
Yeah.
Just for the curious, I'll go ahead and read it. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in the high places. Stand firm, then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist. Ephesians 6:12-14.
For you know my name is the Lord.
Yeah, so anyway, the book starts off with the whole Bible verse, which, once again,
And
actually
with the
legit.
background of a galaxy,
Yeah.
like a swirling galaxy, and you almost miss it, a tiny little spaceship at the bottom.
Right. And then we cut to basically interior of, I guess, the spaceship, and then it seems like
It's like a monitoring
Right.
station. You come to find out it's a monitoring station.
and I think it's 1999 is the specific
December
date.
99.
Right. And then
Those were good years.
99? Yeah. That's when Third Eye Blind.
Y2K.
Yeah, Y2K. Third Eye Blind was still popular.
Yeah.
And then it looks like the person's watching some. Now, is it clear? I was a little lost in this. Was it clear that this is old footage?
No, at first you're not sure what's going on, and there's this guy who seems to be a cross between like
Macho
Hulk Hogan,
Man.
Macho Man Randy Savage, and Jesse Ventura.
Right.
He's like a mixture of the three. Is asleep and he's monitoring the station, and he's woken up, by what he's seeing, and there's no dialogue on the screen, but he's like, oh, this is really interesting, and buzzes to get home base or whoever he's trying to talk to.
And he clearly talks in like macho man talk.
They talk in
hey, brother, what is it?
Everything's wrestling speak, like 80s wrestling speak.
Right, exactly.
This book is very, it's funny. You could tell the author and the authors, I should say, probably are around our age, maybe a little younger, because it's very 80s influenced. And then to skip ahead, I feel like this is an analogy of wrestling from the 80s into the 90s.
For sure. Because
the 90s influence of you could be a heel or a face. In fact, you could be both in one character was not how it was in the 80s. You were either a good guy or a bad guy.
Right,
There was no mixing of the two. And I feel like this was influenced by it's trying to tell the story of wrestling.
For sure.
Through this weird story of a planet of wrestlers.
And then, actually, going back to that, I mean, I was a huge wrestling fan back in the 80s, and I dabbled in it in the 90s. But you were also too, right, Johnny?
Oh, in the 80s, I was huge.
Let's not. I'm going to jump in. When I first opened this, I thought of G.L.O.W, not the Netflix show.
Yeah, the original.
The Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling.
Oh, so you did watch that?
I was born and raised in SoCal, and my sister and I would watch it every Saturday morning. And we also, this is where the sexism comes in. Yeah, we stopped like when Hulk Hogan and everybody came on, like it was like the men's wrestling. But yeah, we like loved G.L.O.W, and
my sister and I did too.
Yeah, we were very familiar with the men's wrestling, Hulk Hogan, and to your point, it was very much good guy versus bad guy.
Right.
There was no crossover.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would put my sister in the camel clutch. And figure 4 leg locks. Any wrestling move on there, I would be like, "Here, let me try it." She'd be like, "No, I don't want." I'd be like, "Too tough," and then I'd just sit there and camel clutch her, which it really fucking hurts to camel clutch somebody. It's no joke. Or a figure 4 leg lock, it hurts.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's the thing to be said as quote unquote fake wrestling is. I mean, that's a lot of like skilled work to not get hurt.
And that's a big critique about the WWF is everyone is a contractor, so they don't have health coverage.
Right.
They can pay them whatever. And then these guys get chewed up. Like, look at Jake the Snake Roberts. I mean, the guy is practically disabled from all of the wear and tear on his body. And he was a pretty big star. And, like, the only people who seemed to really make it out of there with any sort of success and money were, like, Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, The Rock.
Well, there's a reason. Those guys kind of bailed, in a sense, early, but then had a movie career.
Well,
endorsements.
I don't know. Have you seen some of those scandalous films of his?
So when I was little, though, I didn't know it was fake.
Oh, I didn't either.
No.
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought it was.
I remember we had a neighbor who's. This was probably when I was about 12-ish. We had neighbors that lived across the street, and they would watch us in the evening between when we got home from school and before my mom got home from work. And we were all excited because I think it was the WrestleMania where Hulk Hogan and Andre were going to fight. Is that 3? I think that's WrestleMania 3. That's like the biggest one ever. And we're like, this is so cool. This is going to be so awesome. Rah! Him and the son of this couple and myself were so excited to see this. And the dad was like, you guys know this is scripted, right? And we're like, what the fuck is wrong? No, it's not. Like, we were so adamant that it was real. Like, this was a real thing that was going to happen. He's like, no, they decide these things. Like, no. Andre the Giant's going to get into the ring with Hulk. It's going to be, we were trying to argue it.
Well, the way they acted, too, the sweat, and then sometimes they would have blood. It seemed pretty real to me as a kid. So, yeah, I actually didn't watch too much G.L.O.W.
Well, I also thought hoverboards were...
Apparently, G.L.O.W. is not a NorCal thing. It was strictly SoCal.
Yeah.
No, it was up here.
Oh, was it? Because I was super excited when it came out, and Andy's like, what are you talking about? When it came out on Netflix, the TV show. And none of my friends knew.
Christy, my wife, watched it with her sister, too.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
So, yeah.
An important thing that we left out is below, when this opening scene in outer space starts, it says... A Date with Destiny, and that name Destiny comes back at the end.
I never catch these things. I never do. I'm just as shocked as our listeners are.
And then on the screen, it also says there's like a Mean Gene Okerlund type of guy. This little Frenchy
almost
looking
like a
dude.
butler kind of. Yeah.
Is interviewing a wrestler, and below that says American Wrestling Federation upcoming Summer Slamabration.
I love that.
So this thing happens in outer space where he reports, and then we cut to 15 years later.
Right, so it makes it clear that this 15 years earlier, which the wrestler looks the same who was on the screen. So it's clear that the guy who was in the spaceship was watching an old recording somehow. Which that always weirds me out too. That's like an old sci-fi trope where stuff that we're recording or shooting into our satellites is slowly traveling throughout space.
What was that? That movie Interstellar or whatever with Matt
Damon?
No. Matthew.
Oh, McConaughey.
Yeah.
McConaughey.
I almost said Broderick. That would have been a better movie.
But then I always worry, it's funny because this does play into that trope, but I always worry that an alien species will find our recordings but not be able to discern what's real and fake, because as far as they're concerned, we're just transmitting normal stuff. And so they'll see us killing aliens and then like being warmongers and all this.
I guess we're not going to go to that planet.
Exactly. Yeah. Or they need to we're aggressors.
Yeah.
And so they need to take us out.
Only the warmongering aliens will come.
And they'll think we're so, scientifically advanced because of Star Trek and Star Wars. Like, oh my gosh.
So we pick up in a green room where this wrestler who is identified as Rory Landell is talking into the mirror. He's getting his pregame speech ready, and then this woman comes in who looks like a cross between Carmen Miranda and Miss Elizabeth.
Right.
Who, if you don't know, Miss Elizabeth was Randy Macho Man Savage's promoter, ringside person.
I'm sure everyone knows
later
that.
Wife, right?
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people. Yeah, they were married in real life, and I think later divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And then she passed away in the 90s.
She did.
Yeah.
She did.
From a DDT. Someone did a DDT on her. And
I thought she just ate too many Slim Jims because that's all they had.
Oh, yeah, brother. Slim Jim. Step into a Slim Jim.
R.I.P.
And then, Macho Man passed away a couple years ago, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. He's up there putting his pinky in
somebody
else's in God's face. When who guards the gate to heaven? St. Peter? St. Peter. Oh, yeah, St. Peter. I'm coming in.
You're going to let me in the gate.
So yeah,
it turns out that it sounds like he's going to go from a heel, a bad guy.
Well, he wants to.
I thought this was his opportunity. Like they were going to set up.
It seems like that's the impression. Like he's like, I'm going to finally I'm going to make my career into something bigger. And it appears that
he's going to get the championship belt.
And this woman and Rory are in a romantic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of flirting and fucking with each other a little bit, like in a fun way.
I actually thought this was pretty legit. Like I felt like the authenticity of this scene. Like I felt like the chemistry between them and everything.
It was legit. And I just love her look.
Right.
Like, like they always had characters on the sideline, on the side of the ring back then.
They seemed very in love and supportive, and he seemed happy.
Yeah. This witch doctor looking wrestler named Herman comes in and tells him, "Hey, Mr. Drazen wants to see you right now. Right now." So we cut to Rory going into where this practice match is going on between like a hacksaw Jim Duggan type and a bear.
Okay, so this is the part where it's semi lost me, only because everything up to this point is semi like realistic, right? And then they actually legit have a real bear.
See, the reason this feels like an analogy to like what really happened in wrestling was they're talking about this is going to be the first big pay-per-view event.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in this world, this American Wrestling Federation, whatever it's called, is moving from like the barn wrestling into like a legitimate televised TV soap opera sport. And Rory is one of the people that can see what's coming, and he wants to be a bigger part of it.
Right, he wants to become a face.
So that's why I would really love to speak with these two authors about like what was the research that you did. Were you guys big lifelong fans of wrestling?
I feel like they were, but yeah.
They just seem to really know a lot about the history of it, from the 70s where it was like starting to get 50. I mean, it had been on TV since the 50s, but like it didn't get big until we were kids in the 80s. Like around that time. Say your prayers, eat your vitamins, do your homework. Oh yeah, brother. So Rory meets Drazen, and
he's the main promoter owner of the Federation.
He's the Vince McMahon. Of
right, and he basically tells him, "Look, there's been a change of plans."
Yeah, Schultz, this wrestler Schultz, who we don't meet,
right,
is seems to be getting better ratings than you. So change of script. You're gonna stay a heel.
Right. Exactly.
And one of the arguments that Drazen has is no one's gonna buy you being a good guy because it seems like he's kind of a braggart.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's his character is
right.
is talking shit and saying he's the best there is. And...
Which is, like you said earlier, it does talk about the transition of wrestling periods because once you were a hero, you were always a hero. And I remember it was such a big deal when Hulk Hogan went to, was it the NWA?
Yeah. And he his handlebar stayed blonde, but like his beard was completely shoe polished black.
Right, and he wore black, and he was a bad guy, and you're like, wait, that's not Hulk Hogan.
Or it was a big deal in one of the WrestleManias when Macho Man came out and like helped Hulk Hogan, and then they became a duo for a short period of time.
Right, right,
that was a big deal when we were because like, what?
I know.
Macho Man's a good guy now. Like, what's going on?
So Rory obviously is not pleased with this.
In fact, he's so mad he grabs Drazen by the wrist and like
I thought he broke
breaks it. Yeah. Which is paralleled immediately after this is Rory storms off, and when he's walking in the back hallways of this like big wrestling facility, a character named Dawn grabs him by the wrist and drags him into the women's changing area.
Right, which is weird. I was like,
well, I don't think it was intentionally just creepy. It was just like he was so pissed at him.
Right, let's go over here.
Yeah, he was like, come in here. And it's implied that Dawn has been involved in wrestling for a really long time. He's got this really ornate cane, which you don't know it at the beginning, but on the cover, he's on the cover with Rory.
And then Dawn's Hawaiian, but he plays a stereotypical
Fu Manchu type,
Chinese wrestler,
yeah,
which speaks once again to the 80s of let's
which is in the G.L.O.W. Netflix show,
right? It is.
They talk about these stereotyped characters,
and then it just basically almost racially stereotyped, but in some ways, I don't know, as a person of color, it was weird. Because I saw some of those as like, that's me represented, right? It's like Street Fighter. When you see a character from your ethnicity, it's like, that's awesome. Yeah. It's not some other white guy. But, on the flip side, it's also super stereotypical. And where it's like, it's not actually the best representation of that.
That's how I felt when I saw Return of the Jedi and the Ewoks living in the Forest. I was like, look, I'm great. My race is being represented on film, but we don't all live in forest cities. Some of us live on the ground in caves. Some of us like to live by rivers in huts.
But you all worship the Golden God.
A C-3PO coming down is definitely, I was atheist until I saw that. I was like, oh my God, C-3PO, our Golden God is here.
I can say for a fact that I almost exclusively played Sagat from Street Fighter because he was from Thailand.
Oh, really?
I was like, yeah. So, I mean, that's a big deal when you see yourself represented. And nowadays, it's a big push, obviously, to have representation in media. But that's all you had was like these wrestlers who dressed up in these terrible garbs.
I had Ponch from Chips. So that was it.
I had a fake Asian in terms of Kung Fu. What's his name from Kill Bill?
Yeah, David Carradine.
Yeah, David Carradine, but I didn't know that at the time. I was like, look, there's an Asian.
I'm always represented in all forms of media, so
pretty much.
I just can't relate right now.
Yeah. And Catholicism, and you could watch The Exorcist, and you're like, there's my religion.
So getting back to the story, Dawn relates to Rory a story about a guy he used to wrestle with who was a wrestler, got tired of it, and went to go start a turkey farm.
Right.
And that was kind of his out, whereas Rory doesn't really have an out. He's fed up with this, but he doesn't really have any options to and I thought that was my impression of the story. It was like Rory or Dawn was telling Rory, like, look, if you're gonna you're sick of this, you need something else to fall back on. And
Or like have a goal, right?
yeah,
That's the end, because you could be a jobber, which is basically a person who just always gets beat up. They're the ones who have like no
yeah, it'd be like Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus Fred.
right, and he'd
Yeah.
have no like decorations.
Yeah.
It would be like a
They were,
standard
they were
spandex.
always like 100 pounds lighter than
Right.
the wrestler. Jesus, what happened? Someone should make a documentary about
All the
those
jobbers.
guys. Yeah, the journeymen of WWF.
It's true.
Yeah, those guys.
But yeah, so the Don's old partner eventually became he didn't follow him, but he assumed that he became like a world class whatever turkey farmer.
Yeah.
But he had a goal. Do what you got to do. Don't let your ego get you in play. You don't have to be the face. You just
And I also got the impression that Don, while he doesn't like the stereotype, he still loves being part of wrestling.
right.
Like even if he's like, even if I have to play the stereotype character, I enjoy.
And there's always a cost. No matter
Right.
what you do, there's a cost. There's a price you have to pay. Everyone has something about their job they don't like.
Yeah.
Well, and I
Like
imagine
you too. That's I
honestly,
hate about this job.
I'm sure. I'm
Oh,
sure
I'm sure
that
too.
that's.
I'm just crying in the corner. Carry on.
I'm sure that it was also a struggle for, and I forgot the actor's name, but he was in Gung Ho and whatever 16 Candles. But the guy who played Long
Oh
Duck Dong.
God, yeah, that poor guy.
Yeah, I mean the thing is that that's a role for you, and that's the only opportunities we had as Asians back
Well,
then.
that's the complaint about a lot of like Persian, Asian Americans of
Mhm.
like for the past 20 years, like, well, the only role I can get is the Muslim terrorist.
Right.
That's
Or the stereotypical Chinese grocery store or sensei.
yeah.
What's his name from Big Trouble in Little China? The main bad guy.
Oh yeah.
He's been in a ton of stuff, and I'm sure he wasn't super happy.
Are you
with
sure, Dennis? Are you sure about that?
I'm aware. But, then again, just like we talked about David Carradine, you've also had basically tan
Whitewashing,
face,
yeah.
brown face, where it's just like actors who are pretending to be another ethnicity.
Don also is kind of trying to bolster Rory, and he tells him like Schultz isn't much of a wrestler, so don't. I got the feeling he was trying to tell him like, don't worry, just let's stick to the plan of making you a bigger star, which Rory immediately doesn't do. So later that evening, it's the big pay-per-view match between Rory, who is known by Rock and Roll Rory Landell, against Boy Scout Bob Schultz. Rory is being interviewed by that Mean Gene Okerlund guy.
And he was given a pre-script or a script to say.
Like, here's the change of the script.
Right.
Drazen gave him the script, said, look, here's the change to it, stick to it. And then this is the actual interview that the space station 15 years later picks up.
Which I love. I love this scene.
Yeah. And we find out Don's character is named Mr. Don Fong Wong. We also learned that Rory and Schultz have faced off in the past, and Rory was disqualified. So during this interview, Rory goes off the script saying the championship and the wrestling league aren't anything to him. He's so bitter about
But I like it. He basically really leans into it. He's giving a middle finger. He knows he's going to kill his career.
Well, and he's like in character, but he's also like speaking from his heart too. He says he's the best in the universe and will be able to defeat any creature that challenged him.
Yeah, and he goes off like any Martians, anyone.
So you guys are missing the best part.
Oh, which part?
He made his own belt.
Yeah,
Right.
And he has a
was
T-shirt
great.
that says Rory's #1 fan. Like that is so 80s wrestling.
Right.
Yeah.
And then his wrestling
looked
belt
like
is made
duct
from
tape.
this Galaxy Pizza box, so it's a Galaxy wrestling belt.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he's like, basically he's like, I don't care about being a wrestling champ for this league. I'm the Galaxy's wrestling champ, which I love.
Yeah.
I did love that too. It was great.
Yeah.
And
So
then the Mean Gene guy is like,
yeah, he's trying to get him back on course to the script. In the middle of it, Rory leaves the building. Dawn runs after him. Like, could you imagine during a pay-per-view?
Right.
So skipping ahead a little bit, Drazen's really mad at Rory for doing this, and he's like, he's done in this league.
Right.
But really, if something like this happened, I feel like fans would be like, oh shit, what's
Right.
happening next? Like,
Right.
how are they gonna fix this?
And
I really think it would catapult him into being to the point of it would catapult him into being a bigger star, to the point where Drazen would have to okay, fine, let's make you a hero because so much interest is in you. There, we're gonna make a ton of money off the
for
next
sure.
match.
For someone to be that boisterous and yeah, that level of hubris, I wish I knew more about wrestling in terms of the background, because I often wonder, like, how personal conflicts, because you can't always get along with your coworkers, but how does that work into when you're like talking shit about them?
Yeah.
And then some of them ad-lib, and you can tell sometimes some of it feels a little more personal than others. So I often wonder, like, how real life bleeds into the workplace for wrestling.
Yeah, sometimes. Rory leaves the building in the middle of the interview. Dawn runs after him and is trying to talk him into staying in the league. But Rory tells him, like, kind of under his breath, that he's going out to find his own turkey farm. And you see Rory's girlfriend, a silhouette of her in the doorway.
Well, yeah, that's the kind of. It looks like she's a wrestler too. Well, I'm not sure if she's a wrestler.
I think she's like the Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah, right.
Kind of.
But that kind of, I was kind of bummed about that, because they seemed so much in love, and he just stormed off without talking to her, and it seemed like she wasn't sure where he was going, and so I wasn't sure where that left the relationship.
And they did a really cool. I love the way the illustrator for this transition, like, you see it slowly scaling up and the signal bouncing through the sky and then going into outer space and being picked up by this monitoring station.
Right, and different aliens are hearing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was great.
So this part was a little confusing to me, and I had to go back and read it 2 or 3 times to be like, oh, I see what they mean. So it says a few days later, and it's back on Earth. And when the space signal is picked up, or when the signal's picked up in outer space,
It says December 1999.
December 99. I was like, wait, a few days later,
Right.
but it looks like Rory and Dawn are super old, like
Right.
much,
that part
much
I got.
older.
I thought it was like a flash forward to 15 years now.
Yeah,
Like,
and then I
yeah.
realized, oh, it's a few days after
See,
December
that
9th.
part I followed.
Oh, way
So.
to go.
Get it?
But yeah, so it took 15 years basically for the TV signal to finally reach this.
I got that part. I just didn't realize we're now picking up a few days
Right.
after 15 years later. That's what I didn't get. And it looks like Rory is out in some kind of desert community.
Yeah,
on an Indian. Turns out it's like an Indian gambling casino.
And clearly, obviously, not some big wrestling federation.
No.
It's one of those backyard wrestling federations,
Like a D-list kind of thing.
which
Like,
still happens today. You see it.
there's tons of them.
Yeah.
All over. There's one in Sacramento
Yeah,
here.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, this is one thing I will say, is that some of those backyard wrestling ones, although they don't get all the glamour and glitz that a main one like WWE has, those wrestlers put all their heart into that wrestling, and they put on a great show. So this is just a stereotypical, oh, you're kind of in the scumbag league, but normally some of those unknown wrestling federations actually do a really great job.
They just don't have the money behind
Right.
it to promote it up like that.
Yeah. So I think it's very clear from like the first few panels, he's not doing well. He's
No.
down on his luck. He's in a shiesty car,
Yeah.
going to some shiesty tournament.
His hair's receding. Dawn is completely white, like white hair, white mustache.
So right here, I started thinking of the movie The Wrestler with Mickey
Oh,
Rourke
yeah.
and Marissa Tomei.
Mhm.
I was like, I think it's going to go down that path.
Yeah.
Like kind of washed up, down on his luck, not a lot of money, trying to ink out whatever living he can.
Yeah.
And it's clear, like, his opponent, who looks like this very short
He's like a matador.
matador, basically says, "You're not going to piss yourself, right?" Again.
And it's clear he's intoxicated or he's on drugs or something. Because
Right.
in the middle of the match, he like, oh God, I don't feel good, and just like passes out while they're fighting.
And essentially falls into the audience. Yeah.
The pit boss or whoever it is that's managing this casino is talking to Dawn, and he's like, he's done here. Like, you guys have burnt every single bridge in the wrestling community, and Dawn's trying to, like, hey, it's not as bad as it seems. Like, give us another chance, and
And give
like,
us our
"No."
money. And it's
Yeah,
like,
he's like,
money?
"No,
we had so many refunds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they wind up leaving the town. They're on to the wherever they can go to next, and Rory and Dawn start arguing about.
And apparently Rory had slept with a hooker inside one of the like PT cruisers.
He's just made a ton of,
Which
bad-
makes me sad, because clearly that means he's not with that girl anymore.
And Dawn relates to him like, hey, I'm retiring. I'm sick of this. I'm done. I'm tired. I can't keep doing this with you. And Rory gets pissed and is like, well, then just let me off right here.
Mm-hmm.
And Don tries to talk him out of it. Like, no, let's just get to the next thing, and then I'm retiring. And he's like, nope, let me out. And Don tells Rory, well, then I'm gonna leave. If you get out of the car, I am leaving. And sure enough, he does it. And there's somewhere like between Mexico and Yuma, Arizona, which I don't know if you've ever been in that area.
Mm-mm.
There is jack shit, and it is hot as fuck.
That's what the imagery looked like. I've never been, but
I've been to Yuma, Arizona once. It is ugly as shit and hot as fuck out there.
Then it cuts to the planet.
To the Planet Wrestletopia. I love this. It's so over the top ridiculous. I love it. There's this giant glass building, and inside there's this guy who kind of looks like Syndrome from
Incredibles.
The Incredibles,
right? Like a skinny, like if David Bowie and Syndrome combined,
and one of the bad guys from Mad Max,
like exactly,
fucked and had a baby. It would be Adrian Polaris, which is this guy's name, which is awesome.
And he basically says it seems like Earth has declared itself a galaxy hero.
He walks into this room and says, excuse me, his championshipness. Like, I love that title. That they picked up a signal from Earth, like quote unquote Earth, and the planet has declared their own galactic champion, rock and roll Rory Landell. And then the silhouette turns around and
then he goes full wrestler. And I love this. And then basically this is where you find out the main bad guy is Manifest Destiny.
Yeah. And he looks like that. Oh God, it was in the 70s. It was like the Phantom of the Opera, but with the guy with the RoboCop type mask, and it was like a rock and roll
opera.
Yeah, like a mix of Phantom of the Opera with what's the I can't think of the movie.
Mad Max?
No, the one that everyone goes to the midnight screening. They dance.
Rocky Horror.
Yeah, it's like a cross between those two.
And yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because
and that's where it ends.
Basically, yeah. Issue number one was like a supersized issue.
It does use the Mad Max line.
What line?
2 shall enter, 1 shall
leave.
Yeah, they don't say it, but it's in the imagery. It's like 2 universes will enter, 1. Even I got the Mad Max reference for Tina Turner.
Yeah, Mad Max.
And the Dome.
We don't
Thunderdome.
need another hero.
Do you see it? Do you have it pulled up? It's in there. I swear. I forget where it's at, but it is I think it's right at the end. It's.
You're just imagining things.
No, I'm not. But I will say that made me I need to read the second issue. Yeah. I need to see.
Yeah, these were really good. I loved it. I thought it was so. You could tell he has such a love. The writers and the artists have such a love of wrestling, like showmanship wrestling.
Oh yeah,
and it's just threaded throughout this. The way characters look, the way they talk. Like I could hear them say, "Oh yeah, brother!" Like every time. Like it was done so well.
And I like this part because it's a little bit of almost.
It's good world building.
Yeah, exactly. It's good world building. You don't feel overwhelmed. As ridiculous as it is to have a whole planet based upon wrestling, it you just buy into it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm a sucker for this kind of Last Starfighter sort of thing, where we're just dumb Earthlings, but then there's this weird thing that somehow gets us involved in this galactic thing, and we have a chosen person who just thinks they're just a normal human being, and suddenly they're the champion for the galaxy.
For everyone, yeah. No, it was done so well. I loved it. I love the art. I can't wait to read the other two.
Yeah. Well, did you read the other two?
No, not yet. I haven't.
I've read them.
You read them all through? Yeah. All the way through.
So they were pretty good.
Don't talk about them because we'll read them future episodes.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we'll do summer special or something like that. But because I don't want to know. I don't know anything yet about them. What about you, Francis? What'd you think?
Yeah, I'm looking for the thing. Was it in issue 2?
I haven't read
2 universes will enter.
Yeah,
one will.
It might be issue 2. So you're reading it.
Sorry. Yeah, Sorry, I'm really being stubborn and hellbent on this right now, and I'm trying to find it. So
the word is difficult.
I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna screenshot it later. So this is why I love comic books. It's escapism. It's fun. it looks ridiculous, but it draws you in.
Yeah.
And like you start to care about these people. You want to know what's next. You want to read the next issue. It's not so deep. We've read some great deep books. Don't get me wrong. There's a time and a place, but it's just so fun.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. And to what you guys were saying earlier, nerding out, that they obviously knew wrestling, these writers. They weren't just like trying to catch the newest, trendiest wave.
Yeah, surface level.
Yeah, they really know their stuff, and I loved it.
Other medium could you do this story in? Like you couldn't really try. Like it'd be so difficult to pull this off. Like this is why comic books are great. It's like this is one of those stories where you could only really functionally pull it off successfully in this form. Yeah,
well,
it's a great book.
Wrestling shows are just comedic. Like they're not.
Yeah,
they're not gonna.
It's popcorn entertainment. You know, it's just like
But-
fluff.
But for something so one-dimensional in this sense, I mean, you really feel for Rory. I'm really invested in like what happened to his relationship.
You get Dawn's frustration with it
Yeah.
too.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I found it. So it's at the recap. It says next issue: 2 worlds enter, 1 leaves.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, oh my God, I was gonna be like, no.
I didn't doubt you. I just didn't see it.
I totally
know.
did.
But that line just was like, oh my God, it's gonna be so good. I gotta read it.
Yeah.
So no, I thought it was great. And we don't really talk about this a whole lot. Sometimes we do. I really like the coloring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bright.
Like, well, it's bright, and then it's also like you get like when he's in despair, when he's in the heat,
Yeah.
you get it kind of has that like just that shady feel. Like it's kind of a dirty underground.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not a prestigious profession.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great.
So how did you get this book?
So
Because it was a Dropbox. It wasn't like we didn't
so,
download it.
There's
By the way, that's Dropbox in the software sharing site, not some weird shady
Oh, yeah.
thing that Johnny was just like,
Go to the Dropbox at midnight, pick up the issue.
hey, buddy, you want to read a comic?
So Starburns Industries that does Rick and Morty. They did what was the TV show that Dan Harmon did? I can't even think of the TV show.
Ren and Stimpy?
No, not Ren and Stimpy.
No, that's Rick and Morty.
No, but his live action TV show.
Oh, Community.
Yeah, Community. Harmontown. They're now branching. Excuse me. They're now branching into press, and they've started comic books. So they picked up Eben Burgoons, a friend of our show. They picked up his comic book B Squad, and we've sort of built a relationship with some of the people that work in there because it's just a startup. And the writer of this, I believe, heard about us through Eben and contacted us to ask if we would review the comic book, which happens from time to time. Writers will contact us to review their comic books, so that's what they did. And
sometimes they regret it.
And sometimes they regret it. But no, this is such a good book. I'm so glad we got to see it, and I highly recommend it. I hope other people will pick this book up too.
This is one that I actually I want to buy it, and I want to buy the series. I want to have it so I can go back to it later.
And I think at least right now it's exclusively available through Comixology.
Yeah, I believe it is. Yeah, my one regret or drawback to this is we didn't have a hard copy. I would have loved to have flipped through the book and been able to really look at panels and see how it was laid out. But no, so
I'm hoping once the at least initial arc is done, maybe they'll collect into a trade.
Print, something like that. So thank you to Ed and Matt and Dan for sending this to us and allowing us to read it. It was great.
Yeah, thanks.
So where can people follow the podcast there?
You can follow us on Insta and Twitter at Gene Explorers Club.
What about you, Francis?
You can follow me on Insta at Words in Waffles, and I'll be getting married in 6 months. So if you want to see a tedious post about flowers and dresses, follow me.
Oh man!
By the time this is up, you'll have been dragging Andy down with you. But
marriage.
But yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Oh yeah, brother.
Greetings, explorers. I'm one of your hosts, World Tag Team. What?
Why are you yelling?
Because this is a wrestling one.
Oh, we do a wrestling intro.
Yeah.
In this corner, we have.
All right.
We're gonna be here till 4
I know.
o'clock today.
This is the other podcast where Dennis just stares at the screen.